Imagine waking up with a hangover, only to realize you're not in your hotel room. You're in your boss's bed. That's exactly what happened to Lily, a hard-working assistant who made one drunken mistake that changed her life forever. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of firing her, her cold, calculating millionaire boss Henry did something no one expected. This accidental bed invasion set off a chain of events that transformed their strictly professional relationship into something neither of them was prepared for. What happens when one glass of wine becomes several, and your hotel room suddenly becomes impossible to find? Lily's night of celebration was about to take an unexpected turn. Lily Parker had earned this moment. After 6 months of sleepless nights, preparing presentations, organizing schedules, and anticipating her boss's every need, the Westbrook deal was finally closed. The champagne flowed freely at the luxury oceanside resort, where executives and their support staff gathered to celebrate landing their biggest client of the quarter. As Henry Ford's executive assistant, Lily had orchestrated every detail of the week-long negotiation down to the specific temperature of the conference room. Now, for the first time in months, she could breathe. The weight of responsibility had lifted, if only for one evening. The resort's terrace bar overlooked a stunning coastline where waves crashed against jagged rocks and the sunset painted the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks. Lily sipped her first glass of wine slowly, savoring both the expensive vintage and the rare feeling of accomplishment. "To Lily," announced Charles Callahan, the company's marketing director, raising his glass, "without whom our fearless leader would probably still be trying to schedule the first meeting." The group laughed, and even Henry Ford, notorious for his stoic demeanor, offered a slight nod of acknowledgement. His steel blue eyes met Lily's for a brief moment, the closest thing to approval she'd seen from him in the 2 years she'd worked as his assistant. "Speech," someone called out, but Lily shook her head modestly. "I'm just doing my job," she replied, feeling the warmth of recognition wash over her. That first glass of wine gave way to a second, as colleagues shared stories and laughter. By the third glass, Lily's professional guard had completely dissolved. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and freedom as it tousled her usually perfectly styled brown hair. The fourth glass coincided with her shoes coming off under the table, her toes curling into the soft carpet of the resort's exclusive dining room. "I can't remember the last time I saw you actually relax," remarked Natalie from accounting, who had become something of a friend during their time working together. "That's because it's never happened," Lily replied with a laugh that came easier than usual. "There's always another deadline, another meeting, another crisis that only I can solve." The night stretched on, and with each passing hour, the weight of responsibility that normally sat on Lily's shoulders continued to dissolve. When the group finally dispersed around midnight, she realized she'd completely lost track of time and her usual precision. The resort's hallways seemed to stretch endlessly as Lily made her way back to her room. The plush carpet muffled her barefoot steps, shoes dangling from her fingers as she tried to focus on the room numbers that refused to stay still. Was she on the 3rd floor or the 4th? Had she taken a wrong turn at the elevator? 415, 415, she muttered to herself, trying to remember her room number as the corridor gently swayed around her. The digits on the doors blurred together, dancing before her eyes like they were performing some elaborate numerical ballet. After what felt like an eternity of wandering, Lily turned a corner and noticed a door slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness inviting her in. The brass numbers on the door seemed vaguely familiar, though they refused to stay still long enough for her to be certain. "Thank you, universe," she whispered, pushing the door open wider. In her wine-hazed mind, this open door was clearly a sign from the cosmos that she had reached her destination. The room was bathed in darkness, save for the moonlight streaming through partially drawn curtains. The silhouette of a large bed beckoned to her, promising comfort and the sweet release of sleep. Without bothering to turn on the lights, Lily kicked off her shoes, letting them land with soft thuds on what she assumed was the plush carpet of her resort room. Her designer clutch, a splurge she'd permitted herself after last year's bonus, flew in an arc toward what she thought was the dresser. The satisfying sound of it landing confirmed in her mind that her aim remained impeccable, even under the influence. The cool sheets welcomed her as she collapsed onto the bed, not bothering to remove her cocktail dress or even pull back the covers. The mattress felt unusually comfortable, the pillows extraordinarily soft, surely an upgrade from what she remembered from checking in. But Lily was far too tired to question this stroke of good fortune. "Perfect," she mumbled into the pillow, her eyes already closing as the room spun gently around her. The faint scent of an unfamiliar cologne registered somewhere in the back of her mind, but was quickly dismissed as some high-end room fragrance the resort used. As sleep claimed her, Lily had no idea that she'd just made the most significant mistake of her professional career. She wasn't in room 415, where her suitcase sat untouched, and her laptop remained charged and ready for tomorrow's final meetings. The brass numbers she'd barely registered had actually read 515, the executive suite reserved for her boss, Henry Ford. While Lily drifted into dreams of promotion and recognition, she remained blissfully unaware that she was currently curled up in the bed of the notoriously private, intimidatingly powerful CEO, whose every command she'd followed for 2 years without question or error. The man known throughout the industry for his exacting standards and zero tolerance for mistakes. The man who, after finalizing some details with investors over late-night drinks, would be returning to his room in less than an hour. The same man who would find his normally flawless assistant fast asleep in his bed. In the moonlight, Lily's expression was peaceful, her guard completely down for the first time since taking on the high-pressure role as Henry Ford's right hand. Her chestnut hair spread across his pillow, her arm wrapped around it in a comfortable embrace. She slept the deep sleep of someone with absolutely no idea how drastically her life was about to change. The gentle ticking of the bedside clock counted down the minutes to morning, and to a reckoning that would transform their strictly professional relationship into something neither of them could have anticipated. That bedside clock finally struck morning, bringing with it a rude awakening no hangover could match. Have you ever wondered what happens when the CEO, known for his ice-cold demeanor, discovers his assistant curled up in his bed? The power dynamic that defined their professional relationship was about to shatter like fine china hitting marble floors. Henry Ford didn't immediately register the warmth beside him. His consciousness surfaced slowly through layers of sleep, his mind sluggishly processing the unfamiliar weight, creating a depression in the mattress. Something was off. The steady breathing that wasn't his own gradually penetrated his awareness. He blinked twice, then froze as his vision confirmed what his other senses were already telling him. He wasn't alone. Turning his head with calculated slowness, Henry found himself staring at the sleeping face of his executive assistant. Lily Parker was nestled comfortably against his side, one arm flung carelessly across his chest, her features peaceful in deep slumber. For perhaps the first time in his professional career, Henry Ford was rendered completely speechless. Lily stirred, unconsciously nuzzling closer to the warmth beside her. The pillow felt unusually firm this morning, but in her half-asleep state, she simply adjusted her position and sighed contentedly. It wasn't until her pillow subtly tensed beneath her cheek that the first alarm bell rang distantly in her mind. Her eyes flew open, pupils dilating with shock as they met the unblinking gaze of her boss. For 5 excruciating seconds, they stared at each other in perfect, horrified silence. "Oh my God!" The scream tore from Lily's throat as she catapulted backward, tangling herself in the sheets and tumbling unceremoniously to the floor. Her heart hammered against her ribs with such force she was certain it would burst. "What are you doing in my room?" she shrieked, scrambling to her feet only to lose balance and fall to her knees. Henry sat up slowly, his expression remarkably controlled for someone whose personal space had just been violated. He smoothed his rumpled t-shirt with methodical precision before responding. "Ms. Parker, I believe you'll find this is actually my room." His voice was level, almost clinical. "Suite 415, executive accommodation." Lily's gaze darted frantically around the room, cataloging unfamiliar details she'd missed in her inebriated state the night before. The leather briefcase on the desk wasn't hers. The neatly folded dress shirts, hanging in the open closet, weren't hers. The prescription glasses on the nightstand definitely weren't hers. No, no, no. Her mortification deepened with each passing second as the full horror of her situation settled over her like a lead blanket. She had spent the entire night sleeping beside her notoriously demanding boss, the man who once fired an analyst for using the wrong font in a presentation. "This can't be happening," she whispered, more to herself than to Henry. Her professional reputation, meticulously built over 2 years of flawless performance, was evaporating before her eyes. Before Henry could respond, 3 sharp knocks at the door froze them both. "Henry, you in there?" Charles Callahan's voice filtered through the door. "The investors are looking for you and Lily. Meeting starts in 15 minutes. Lily's eyes widened in pure panic. Being discovered in Henry's room would transform her mortifying mistake into a career-ending scandal. Without thinking, she dropped to her hands and knees and frantically army-crawled toward the only available hiding spot. Henry watched with something resembling fascination as his typically composed assistant disappeared under his bed. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on him. Lily Parker, who organized multi-million-dollar negotiations without breaking a sweat, was now hiding under his bed, like a teenager caught after curfew. "Just a moment," Henry called, his voice betraying none of the bizarre circumstances unfolding in his room. He pulled on a robe and opened the door just enough to reveal himself, while blocking any view of the disheveled bed. "Morning, Charles," he said smoothly. "I was just about to head down." From her hiding place, Lily could see just enough to watch Henry's bare feet planted firmly on the carpet as he conversed with their colleague. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she pressed herself against the floor, fighting the urge to sneeze from the dust. The psychological impact of her situation triggered a full-blown fight-or-flight response, her body literally preparing her to flee from this embarrassment. "Have you seen Lily?" Charles asked. "She's not answering her room phone, and we need those presentation revisions before the meeting." "I believe she mentioned checking the conference room setup early this morning," Henry replied without hesitation, the lie flowing effortlessly. "I'll let her know you're looking for her, if I see her." The conversation continued for what felt like an eternity to Lily, though it couldn't have been more than 2 minutes. When the door finally clicked shut, she remained frozen, unable to process that Henry Ford, infamous for his zero-tolerance policy, had just covered for her. "He's gone," Henry announced, his voice closer now, as he crouched down to peer under the bed. "You can come out now, Ms. Parker." Cheeks burning with humiliation, Lily extracted herself from beneath the furniture with as much dignity as the situation allowed, which wasn't much. She stood before him, still in yesterday's wrinkled clothes, her hair a disheveled mess, and mascara smudged beneath her eyes. She expected cold fury, an immediate termination, or at the very least, a cutting remark about her unprofessionalism. What she didn't expect was what happened next. The corner of Henry's mouth twitched slightly, the closest thing to a smile she'd ever seen from him. "If you plan to enter the wrong room again, Ms. Parker," he said dryly, "I'd suggest knocking first." The unexpected humor caught Lily completely off guard. In their professional relationship, Henry had always been the embodiment of seriousness, clinical, efficient, and utterly devoid of warmth. This small joke, delivered at a moment when he had every right to be furious, revealed a dimension to him she'd never glimpsed before. I'm so sorry," she stammered, unable to meet his eyes. "This is completely unacceptable, and I understand if you—" "We have a meeting in 12 minutes, he interrupted, glancing at his watch. "I suggest we both get ready." His tone held no judgment, no anger, just pragmatic efficiency, as if finding his assistant in his bed was simply another logistical challenge to navigate. The tension that had coiled inside Lily's chest loosened just enough for her to breathe. She nodded quickly, grateful for the reprieve, however temporary it might be. "Thank you," she whispered, backing toward the door. I'll see you at the meeting." As her hand found the doorknob, Henry spoke again. "Ms. Parker?" Lily turned, bracing herself. Perhaps we could both agree this incident never happened. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, a softness she'd never noticed before. "Absolutely," she agreed instantly. "Never happened. Never happened." Might have been their agreement, but in a luxury resort filled with sharp eyes and sharper tongues, some things refused to stay buried. As Lily hurried down the hallway that morning, her wrinkled clothes from yesterday betraying her secret, she failed to notice Natalie, from accounting, stepping out of the elevator. Those widening eyes caught everything, from Lily's disheveled hair to the unmistakable fact she was exiting Henry Ford's suite. Lily spent the next few hours in a panic, desperately avoiding both Henry and the conference rooms where their colleagues gathered. She changed clothes, fixed her makeup, and practiced her most professional expression in the mirror. The woman staring back looked composed, but her eyes betrayed the storm brewing inside. She rehearsed denials, explanations, and excuses, anything to counter what she feared was already spreading through the resort. When she finally ventured to the buffet breakfast, the sudden hush that fell over the table of junior executives told her everything. Conversations paused mid-sentence, eyes darted her way, and awkward smiles appeared on faces that clearly knew something she wished they didn't. "Sleep well?" Natalie asked, sliding into the seat beside her with coffee in hand and mischief in her eyes. "Perfectly fine," Lily replied, stabbing her fork into a piece of melon with unnecessary force. "Why wouldn't I?" "No reason," Natalie said, her smile widening. "Although the walls in this place are surprisingly thin, don't you think? And the hallways, always someone around, even at the strangest hours." Lily's stomach twisted into a knot. "I have no idea what you're implying." "Oh, I think you do. That walk of shame look is hard to hide, especially when you're leaving the boss's suite at 7 a.m. The piece of melon Lily had been chewing lodged in her throat. She coughed, reaching for water, while Natalie patted her back with mock concern. We didn't," Lily sputtered, lowering her voice to a harsh whisper. "Nothing happened." "Sure, honey," Natalie replied, clearly unconvinced. "That's why Charles Callahan and the entire Westbrook investment team are discussing your special relationship with Henry over mimosas right now." Lily's blood ran cold. The investors, the deal, everything they'd worked for, was now potentially compromised because of one stupid mistake and one nosy colleague. She pushed away from the table, appetite gone, determined to find Henry and warn him before things spiraled further. Her phone buzzed before she could stand. A text from Henry. "My sweet, now we need to talk." The walk back to the scene of last night's disaster felt like marching to an execution. Lily knocked this time, her knuckles rapping weakly against the door that had been her downfall. When Henry opened it, his face was unreadable, the mask of professionalism firmly back in place. "Come in," he said, stepping aside, and closed the door. The suite looked different in daylight, larger, more imposing. Henry gestured toward the sitting area, maintaining a careful distance as Lily perched on the edge of the sofa. "We have a problem," he began, pacing the room with measured steps. "I know, and I'm so sorry," Lily rushed to explain. "Natalie saw me leaving this morning, and now everyone thinks—" "I'm aware of what they think," Henry interrupted, his voice surprisingly calm. "Charles Callahan approached me 20 minutes ago with some interesting observations about our working relationship." Lily buried her face in her hands. "This is a disaster. All our work on the Westbrook deal." "That's the interesting part," Henry said, stopping his pacing to look directly at her. "The investors aren't put off by the rumors. Quite the opposite." Lily lowered her hands slowly. "What do you mean?" "According to Charles, the Callahan investors find the idea of us having a personal relationship reassuring." A ghost of amusement flickered across Henry's face. "Apparently, my reputation for being cold and calculating has been somewhat of a concern for them. The thought that I might actually have human emotions makes them more confident in our partnership." Lily blinked, trying to process this unexpected turn. "So, the scandal is actually helping the deal?" "It seems that way," Henry nodded, settling into the armchair across from her. "Business deals are often influenced by personal relationships between negotiators. The investors believe our supposed connection indicates a strong partnership built on trust, exactly what they're looking for." "But it's not real," Lily pointed out. "We're not actually—" "I'm aware," Henry said dryly, "but perception matters in business as much as reality, sometimes more." A long silence stretched between them as Lily processed the implications. She could see the wheels turning behind Henry's calculating gaze. "You have a solution in mind," she finally said, It wasn't a question. Henry leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. We maintain the perception. For the remainder of this trip, we allow everyone to believe there's something between us. You want us to pretend we're together? Lily's voice rose in disbelief. I want us to secure this deal, Henry corrected. The investors are more comfortable with a version of me that's capable of human connection. If playing a part for a few days helps us close this contract, it seems a small price to pay. Lily stood, needing to move as her thoughts raced. This is crazy. You want us to fake a relationship to close a business deal? I want us to capitalize on an unexpected advantage, Henry replied, his tone becoming more businesslike. The alternative is to deny everything, potentially jeopardize the investors' newfound confidence, and spend the rest of this retreat awkwardly avoiding each other while everyone whispers behind our backs. Put that way, the choice seemed clearer. Still, Lily hesitated. And what happens after? When we get back to the office, we go back to normal, Henry said simply. Once the contracts are signed, what happens at the resort stays at the resort. We maintain absolute professionalism at work. No one there needs to know about this arrangement. So we're just acting for the investors? Precisely. A temporary arrangement with defined parameters and a clear end date. Henry stood, extending his hand as if to seal a business deal. After the trip, we go our separate ways. Professionally speaking, can you handle that? Lily looked at his outstretched hand, weighing her options. The thought of pretending to be romantically involved with her intimidating boss was terrifying, but the thought of being responsible for derailing the biggest deal of the quarter was worse. With reluctance, she took his hand. I'll do it, she agreed. But we need rules, boundaries. Of course, Henry nodded, his grip firm but quick. Nothing inappropriate, just enough to be convincing. And after the retreat, none of this ever happened. Agreed. Lily gathered her courage, straightening her shoulders. Then I guess we're officially a couple. For now. For now, Henry echoed. And Lily couldn't help noticing how his typically cold eyes seemed to warm slightly. Shall we make our debut at lunch? The investors will be there. She nodded, moving toward the door. Before opening it, she paused. Do you think this will actually work? That we can convince them? Henry's mouth curved into a rare smile that transformed his face. You orchestrated a week-long negotiation down to the temperature of the room. I'm certain you can handle playing my girlfriend for a few days. Lily found herself returning his smile, the tension between them shifting into something that felt, strangely, like partnership. As she stepped into the hallway beside him, his hand casually finding the small of her back, in a gesture that already felt like part of their act, she wondered what she'd gotten herself into. That deceptively simple touch at her back felt natural, almost too natural. As investors scrutinized their every interaction, Lily's greatest challenge wouldn't be pretending to like Henry, but hiding how much she actually did. Standing in the hotel suite's spacious living area, Henry paced methodically, laying out their strategy with the precision of a military operation. The key to convincing everyone is maintaining eye contact, Henry explained, stopping directly in front of her. Not constant staring, that's creepy, but comfortable glances that linger just a second longer than you'd look at anyone else. Lily nodded stiffly, mentally taking notes, as though this were just another business presentation. So, basically, I need to look at you like I find you fascinating instead of frustrating. Henry's lips quirked upward. Precisely. We also need to mirror each other's movements. It's something couples do, unconsciously. He demonstrated by shifting his weight slightly, waiting expectantly until Lily awkwardly mimicked his stance. This feels ridiculous, she muttered, arms crossed defensively across her chest. That's problem number one, Henry pointed at her closed posture. You look like you're bracing for an attack, rather than standing near someone you care about. Open posture signals comfort and connection. Lily reluctantly dropped her arms to her sides, feeling exposed. Better? Getting there. Now touch is essential, but needs to appear effortless, Henry continued, stepping closer. May I demonstrate? At her hesitant nod, he placed his hand lightly on her shoulder, then let it trail down her arm in a casual gesture. The contact sent an unexpected shiver through her that had nothing to do with temperature. See how that differs from this? He switched to a robotic pat on her arm that made them both laugh at its absurdity. Physical touch releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, which creates trust between people. We need to harness that biology. You certainly know a lot about faking relationships, Lily observed, eyebrow raised in suspicion. I know a lot about psychology and business negotiation, Henry corrected. The principles aren't that different. Now let's practice. Their first attempts were disastrous. Lily's movements became mechanical whenever she thought about them, her smile freezing into a grimace that would scare small children. When Henry casually took her hand, she jolted as though electrocuted. The trick is not to overthink it, Henry advised. After their fifth failed attempt at natural interaction, "You're in your head too much." "Easy for you to say," Lily shot back. "You're not the one who has to pretend to be in love with your intimidating boss." Something flickered across Henry's face, surprise perhaps, or something deeper, before his expression smoothed. "Fair point. Let's try another approach. Tell me something unrelated to work that made you happy recently." The unexpected question threw her. My niece drew me a picture of us having a tea party with dinosaurs." "How old is she?" 4. "She's convinced T-Rex would have excellent table manners if given proper teacups." Henry's genuine laugh transformed his face, softening the sharp angles that usually intimidated board members and competitors alike. "Smart kid. I'd argue velociraptors would be the true connoisseurs of fine dining." The conversation flowed naturally from there, and Lily found herself forgetting they were practicing anything at all. When Henry's hand brushed hers as they discussed childhood pets, she didn't flinch. She barely noticed. "That," Henry said softly, "is exactly what we need. You were completely yourself, and it worked." The cocktail party that evening would be their first public test. As they approached the resort's elegant oceanfront terrace, Lily felt her pulse quicken. Investors, colleagues, and industry rivals mingled beneath strategic lighting designed to flatter everyone equally. "Ready?" Henry murmured close to her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "Not remotely," she whispered back, but straightened her shoulders and slipped her hand into his offered arm. They hadn't taken 3 steps into the gathering before Charles Callahan materialized before them, champagne flute in hand and curiosity gleaming in his eyes. "There's our power couple," he exclaimed, gaze darting between them. "I must say, this development is quite the surprise. How long has this been going on exactly?" Lily froze, their carefully rehearsed timeline momentarily evaporating from her mind. Every eye in their vicinity seemed to swivel toward them, awaiting her response. Without missing a beat, Henry's arm slid naturally around her waist, his thumb tracing small, comforting circles against the fabric of her dress. "Long enough to know it's worth pursuing, Charles, but recent enough that we're still enjoying the private discovery phase." His expression conveyed both warmth and a subtle warning not to pry further. Lily felt herself relax against him, drawing strength from his steady presence. "We've always had chemistry," she added, surprising herself with how easily the half-truth flowed. "Working together so closely just helped us recognize it." Charles nodded appreciatively. "Well, it shows. I told the others there seemed to be something special between you two. Henry, you've been noticeably more human since you arrived." "I'll take that as a compliment," Henry replied dryly, his hand remaining at Lily's waist. As Charles drifted away, Lily realized that the investor's scrutiny hadn't been as threatening as she'd anticipated. "That wasn't terrible," she whispered. "You were perfect," Henry replied, guiding her toward the bar. "Just perfect." Throughout the evening, Lily found herself settling into their performance with increasing ease. When Henry's hand rested lightly on her back, as they joined a circle of conversation, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. When she reached up to straighten his tie before speaking with a particularly important investor, she didn't have to think about it. The gesture emerged spontaneously. Their silent communication developed with surprising speed. A raised eyebrow from Henry signaled her to rescue him from a tedious conversation. A slight tilt of her head warned him when Charles approached again with more pointed questions. They moved through the space as a unit, anticipating each other's needs without discussion. "You two complement each other beautifully," observed Maria Westbrook, the eldest investor's wife, as she watched Lily hand Henry his preferred drink without being asked. "It's refreshing to see such attunement. Too many couples in business settings look like they're enduring each other rather than enjoying the partnership." The comment struck Lily as profoundly ironic. They were being praised for the authenticity of their fake relationship. Yet she couldn't deny that something had shifted. The robotic awkwardness had vanished, replaced by a flow that felt almost real. By the time the last investors departed, leaving them alone on the terrace, Lily's cheeks ached from genuine smiles rather than forced ones. The performance had succeeded beyond their expectations. Investors who had been cautious at the beginning of the week were now enthusiastically discussing expanded partnership opportunities. "Shall we take a victory walk through the garden?" Henry suggested, offering his arm once more. "I think we've earned a moment of peace." The resort gardens were illuminated by subtle pathway lighting, the ocean breeze carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine. They walked in comfortable silence, no longer needing to maintain their charade, yet strangely reluctant to break contact. "You're a natural at this," Henry finally said, guiding her past a burbling fountain. "I doubt anyone suspected we haven't been together for months." "I had a good teacher," Lily replied, surprised by the sincerity in her own voice. "Though I still don't understand how you became an expert in relationship body language." "Research," he admitted with a hint of self-consciousness. "When I realized how important this deal was and what the investors needed to see, I spent the night studying psychological literature on authentic connections." The image of Henry Ford, notorious workaholic and perfectionist, researching relationship cues just to pull off their deception, struck Lily as both amusing and oddly touching. "Well, it worked," she acknowledged as they completed their circuit of the garden. "I think we've successfully convinced everyone, including ourselves," Henry asked quietly, his gaze meeting hers with unexpected intensity. His question hung in the night air between them, unanswered, but impossible to ignore. After days of practiced smiles and rehearsed touches, something had shifted. The professional boundaries they'd established were blurring with alarming speed, and Lily could feel herself sliding into dangerous territory. What happens when a performance starts feeling real? When Henry asked if they were including themselves in this charade, Lily realized she wasn't entirely sure anymore. Their act had transformed from awkward to natural, with surprising ease. The stiff, calculated movements from their first day had evolved into something that felt almost second nature. Lily no longer needed to remind herself to lean slightly toward him during conversations or to laugh at his rare attempts at humor. Those responses were becoming genuine, and that realization terrified her. It started with small changes to their carefully choreographed routine. A hand at the small of her back that lingered seconds longer than necessary. The way Henry's voice would drop to a whisper when he leaned close, sharing observations meant only for her ears. "Did you notice Charles keeps checking his watch? He's waiting for that call from Tokyo," he'd murmur, his breath warm against her ear, sending unexpected shivers down her spine. These weren't part of their agreement. These unscripted moments were Henry's own additions, and Lily couldn't determine if they were calculated moves or something more authentic. The frustrating part was how her body responded without her permission. The quickening heartbeat, the flush that crept up her neck when his fingers brushed against hers while passing documents. During an investor dinner, Henry casually draped his arm across the back of her chair, his thumb absently stroking the bare skin of her shoulder. The touch was so light, so seemingly unconscious, that no one else would notice. But Lily felt it like an electric current, and when she glanced at him, he was engaged in conversation with Maria Westbrook, as if nothing unusual was happening. Was he even aware he was doing it? The power dynamics between them had always been clearly defined. He was the CEO, she was the assistant. But in this strange in-between world they'd created, those dynamics were shifting unpredictably. Henry had always wielded authority effortlessly, but this was different. This was intimate power, the kind that made Lily hyper-aware of every movement and expression. Their morning walks through the resort gardens became a particular kind of sweet torture. Ostensibly to discuss the day's agenda, these walks had developed into something more personal. Henry would share anecdotes from his childhood or ask questions about her family that went far beyond their professional relationship. During one such walk, as morning sunlight filtered through palm fronds, Henry stopped mid-sentence, his gaze dropping to her lips. Time seemed to freeze. Lily's breath caught in her throat as Henry's expression changed, intensity replacing his usual careful control. For one heart-stopping moment, she was certain he was going to kiss her. She was equally certain she would let him. The sudden anticipation made her dizzy, and then the moment passed, as a groundskeeper rounded the corner with a leaf blower, shattering the tension. Later that day, Lily found herself in the resort's bathroom, staring at her reflection with accusatory eyes. "This isn't real," she whispered to herself. "It's just uncertainty and anticipation, heightening everything." She had read something about that once, how not knowing where you stand with someone can intensify attraction. That was all this was. It had to be. But uncertainty cut both ways. If Henry was simply playing a more convincing game, allowing himself these little liberties to make their act more believable, then Lily was in danger of being the fool who actually fell for it. The thought of Henry realizing she had developed genuine feelings while he remained detached was mortifying. "You're nothing special," she reminded her reflection. "Just another employee he's manipulating for business purposes." The words felt harsh, but necessary. Henry Ford hadn't built his empire by letting emotions interfere with strategy. Why would he start now? Yet she couldn't ignore how his behavior changed when they were alone. The calculated businessman seemed to slip away, replaced by someone more human, more vulnerable. Was that an act too? A more sophisticated level of manipulation? The problem was, Lily couldn't tell anymore, and that uncertainty was becoming unbearable. During a sunset cocktail reception, Henry placed his hand on the small of her back as they approached a group of investors. Nothing unusual there. They'd done this dozens of times now. But this time, his fingers spread slightly, applying the gentlest pressure, guiding her closer to his side. When she looked up at him questioningly, his eyes held a warmth she hadn't seen before. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, quiet enough that only she could hear. It wasn't for show. No one was close enough to overhear. The compliment hung between them, unexpected and sincere. Lily felt something shift inside her. If Henry was going to play this game, adding his own unscripted moments and testing her limits, why should she always be on the defensive? The constant questioning of what was real and what was performance was exhausting. Perhaps it was time to change the rules. The opportunity came during lunch the following day. Seated at a round table with Charles Callahan and two other investors, Lily noticed Henry's calculated charm on full display. As he explained the 5-year growth projection, Lily made her decision. Under the tablecloth, she slowly moved her leg until it rested lightly against his, maintaining perfect composure as she did so. Henry faltered mid-sentence, just for a fraction of a second, so brief that no one else noticed, but Lily saw it. The momentary widening of his eyes, the slight tightening of his jaw. For once, she had caught him off guard. She continued the contact, pretending complete absorption in the conversation, while stealing a glance at his profile. "Everything all right, Henry?" Charles asked, noticing the pause. "Perfect," Henry replied, his voice steady once more. "As I was saying, the projections indicate," he continued seamlessly, but Lily felt his leg press back against hers. Not moving away, but responding, matching her pressure. For the remainder of lunch, they maintained this hidden point of contact while discussing market trends and investment strategies. On the surface, nothing had changed. Two professionals engaged in business discussions, but underneath the table, a different conversation was taking place. One conducted solely through pressure and proximity. When dessert arrived, Henry leaned toward her to offer a taste from his plate. As she accepted, their eyes met, and the look he gave her held a new question. What are we doing? The truth was, Lily didn't know anymore. The boundaries between performance and reality had blurred beyond recognition. What had begun as a business arrangement had evolved into a psychological chess match, each move more daring than the last. Her initial fear of developing feelings had been replaced by something more complex, a determination not to be the only one affected by their charade. As they left the restaurant, Henry placed his hand at her elbow, leaning close to whisper, "I think we should talk about what's happening here." Lily smiled, the picture of professional composure. "Later," she replied, aware of the investors watching them. After the evening reception, she saw something flicker in Henry's eyes. Anticipation, perhaps, or concern. Good, she thought. Let him wonder for a change. The evening air was thick with anticipation as champagne glasses clinked across the terrace. The investors had finally announced their intention to sign the contract. The Westbrook deal was officially secured. Lily watched from across the room as Henry shook hands with Charles Callahan, their smiles genuine for entirely different reasons. The charade had worked. Their fake relationship had served its purpose, convincing the investors that Henry was more than just a cold businessman. Mission accomplished. As the celebration continued late into the night, Lily found herself drifting away from the crowd. The moonlight painted a silver path across the water, beckoning her toward the beach. She slipped off her heels, leaving them at the bottom of the wooden steps, and felt the cool sand between her toes. For the first time in days, she could breathe without calculating her every move. The waves crashed rhythmically against the shore as Lily walked along the water's edge. Their fake relationship was now obsolete. Tomorrow they would return to being just boss and assistant. The thought left an unexpected hollow feeling in her chest. Walking farther from the resort lights, she wrapped her arms around herself, unsure if she was shielding against the sea breeze or something else entirely. Planning your escape? Lily spun around to find Henry standing a few feet behind her, his dress shoes dangling from one hand, tie loosened at his neck. The formal business attire looked strangely incongruous against the backdrop of moonlit sand. "Just needed some air," she replied, trying to sound casual. "Congratulations on securing the deal." "Our deal," he corrected, moving to stand beside her. "Your performance was convincing." She offered a tight smile. "That was the point, wasn't it?" For a moment, they stood in silence, watching the waves roll in. The conversation felt oddly formal, laced with something unspoken. Henry cleared his throat. "The investors were impressed with our quarterly projections. We should see the funds transfer by next week. Business talk. Safe territory." Lily nodded, keeping her eyes fixed on the horizon. "I'll prepare the implementation schedule as soon as we get back." "Back to normal," Henry murmured, more to himself than to her. The wind picked up, sending Lily's hair across her face. When she brushed it away, she found Henry watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Do you want me to forget all of this when we go back?" he asked, his voice lower now, stripped of its professional veneer. The directness of his question caught her off guard. "We agreed this was temporary." "We did." Henry took a step closer. "But I'm asking what you want, not what we agreed to." Lily felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the same sensation she'd experienced whenever he'd touched her arm during dinner or whispered in her ear for show, except there was no audience now. No performance required. "Henry," she began cautiously, "this was never real. We were playing parts." "Were we?" he challenged, his gaze unwavering. "Because at some point, Lily, it stopped being just a game for me." The admission hung in the air between them, impossible to ignore or dismiss. Lily felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. She had spent the past week convincing herself that her feelings were simply a byproduct of their arrangement, of proximity and pretense. "This is complicated," she managed, her voice barely audible above the ocean. "Life is complicated," Henry replied. "Relationships are complicated, but feelings—" He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the moonlight reflected in his eyes. "Feelings can be surprisingly simple. Research indicates that first kisses serve as pivotal moments in relationships, triggering significant emotional and chemical responses." As Henry moved toward Lily, those scientific facts were the furthest thing from her mind, yet her body responded as if it had been programmed for this exact moment. "Can you honestly tell me this meant nothing to you?" he asked, his hand hovering near her cheek, not quite touching. The professional distance she had maintained for years, the boundaries she had insisted upon, even the carefully negotiated terms of their fake relationship, all of it seemed to dissolve in the moonlight. What remained was just Lily and Henry, stripped of their professional identities. "No," she whispered, the truth finally breaking free. "I can't tell you that." The space between them vanished as Henry's lips met hers. Unlike the calculated gestures they had exchanged for their audience's benefit, this kiss was real, unscripted, and unrestrained. Lily's arms wound around his neck as she responded without hesitation, the pretense finally abandoned. The kiss deepened, communicating what words had failed to express. Researchers might attribute this to the release of oxytocin, the bonding hormone responsible for creating intimacy. But all Lily knew was that the wall between performance and reality had finally crumbled. When they finally broke apart, breathless and stunned, Henry kept his forehead pressed against hers, unwilling to increase the distance between them. "That," he whispered, "was not in our agreement." A small laugh escaped her. "I think we're officially off script." His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "Good. I never liked that script anyway." The moonlight illuminated the vulnerability in his expression, a side of Henry Ford that boardroom executives and business rivals would never believe existed. This wasn't the calculated CEO who fired people for using incorrect fonts. This was simply a man who had inadvertently found something he hadn't been looking for. "When did it change for you?" Lily asked, curious about when the shift had occurred. Henry's lips curved into a smile. "I think it started changing the moment you fell asleep in my bed." "That was mortifying," she groaned, burying her face in his shoulder. "It was unexpected," he corrected, his hand running soothingly along her back. Like most of the best things in life, the emotional authenticity of their connection had transcended their unusual beginning. What had started as an accidental mishap, followed by a convenient arrangement, had evolved into something genuine. The mere exposure effect had worked its magic. Their repeated interactions, even when staged, had cultivated real affection. "So what happens now?" Lily asked, reality beginning to seep back in. "Tomorrow we go back to being boss and assistant?" Henry stepped back slightly, his hand still resting lightly on her waist. "Is that what you want?" "No," she admitted, "but I'm not sure what the alternative looks like." "Neither am I," he confessed, "but I'd like to find out. If you would." There was no guarantee, no certainty that a relationship that began under such unusual circumstances could survive the transition to reality. They would face questions, gossip, and professional complications. Yet standing on the moonlit beach, with the taste of his kiss still lingering, those concerns seemed distant and manageable. Lily nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "I would." Henry pulled her close once more, sealing their agreement with another kiss. This one felt different, less urgent, more promising. It spoke of possibilities rather than just desire. Morning sunlight replaced moonlight, and reality crashed back with the ping of an elevator reaching the executive floor. Would the magic Henry and Lily discovered on that beach survive beneath the harsh fluorescent lights of Ford Enterprises? Or was their connection merely a vacation mirage, destined to evaporate? Lily stepped off the elevator, her posture automatically shifting as she crossed the threshold. Back straight, chin up, professional mask firmly in place. The resort seemed like a dream now. A beautiful, confusing dream that had no place in these gleaming hallways. The morning briefing proceeded with mechanical efficiency. Henry sat at the head of the conference table, every inch the CEO in his impeccably tailored suit. If anyone noticed the slight pause when their eyes met, or how carefully they avoided physical proximity when passing documents, no one mentioned it. "Parker, I need the quarterly projections updated by 3, Henry said, his voice clipped and formal. Just like before the resort, just like before everything changed. "Yes, Mr. Ford," Lily replied, the formality of his last name feeling strange on her tongue after whispering his first name against his lips just days ago. At her desk, Lily found herself glancing at Henry's office more frequently than necessary. The glass walls that had once represented transparency and leadership now seemed like an invisible barrier separating two worlds: the professional sphere, where they functioned as boss and assistant, and that other realm, where his hands had tangled in her hair and his whispers had sent shivers down her spine. During a budget meeting, Henry's sleeve brushed against hers as he reached for a report. The brief contact sent an electric jolt through her body, and Lily wondered if anyone noticed her sharp intake of breath. His expression remained impassive, but she caught the slight tightening of his jaw, the only indication that he felt it too. The corporate environment cast their relationship in a harsh new light. Here, their power imbalance wasn't just an abstract concept, it was reinforced by every interaction. Henry made decisions that affected hundreds of employees. Lily scheduled his meetings and managed his calendar. The gap between their positions stretched wide and seemingly unbridgeable. As days passed, doubt began to creep into Lily's thoughts. Was this sustainable? Was what they'd experienced just an anomaly, a perfect storm of circumstances that could never translate to the real world? The memories of their connection remained vivid, but the corporate reality made them feel increasingly distant. Henry, too, seemed to struggle with the transition. A man accustomed to complete command in his professional domain now found himself unable to act on his most powerful feelings. Twice, he called Lily into his office for matters that could have been handled by email. When she entered, he would stand too abruptly, maintain too much distance, as if not trusting himself in her presence. During a presentation to the board, Henry stumbled over his words when Lily entered to deliver updated figures, something the perfectionist CEO had never done before. Several board members exchanged glances, and Lily felt her cheeks warm under their scrutiny. The whispers started small, but spread quickly. The office grapevine, always hungry for fodder, began to buzz with speculation. "Did you see how he watches her when she's not looking?" Lily overheard a junior analyst whisper in the break room. "Something definitely happened at that resort," another replied. "They can barely look at each other now. Maybe they had a fight? Or maybe something else entirely." Lily hurried past, heart pounding. The irony wasn't lost on her. They'd started pretending to be a couple to quell rumors, and now their attempt to hide their feelings was creating new ones. The pressure mounted with each passing day. Every interaction became charged with unspoken words. Every professional exchange was layered with personal meaning. The simplest tasks, handing over a document, reviewing a presentation, sitting in adjacent chairs during meetings, became exercises in restraint. During a client call, Henry spoke about long-term commitment strategies while his eyes held Lily's across the conference table. The double meaning hung between them, visible only to them, but powerful enough to make Lily's hand tremble as she took notes. 2 weeks after their return, Henry snapped at a junior associate for a minor error in formatting. The staff exchanged worried glances. The CEO's legendary control seemed to be fraying at the edges. "Everyone out," he ordered after the meeting. "Parker, stay behind." Alone together for the first time since their return, the silence between them felt deafening. Henry paced behind his desk, his usual composure noticeably absent. "This isn't working," he finally said, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up in a way that made him look more human, more like the man on the beach. "I know," Lily replied quietly. "People are noticing." "I don't care about people noticing," Henry said, his voice sharp with frustration. "I care that I can't focus. I care that I'm running a multi-billion-dollar company, and all I can think about is how the light hits your hair when you stand by the window." Lily's breath caught. "Henry, no, let me finish," he interrupted. "I've built my entire career on control, on making rational decisions, on never letting emotions interfere with strategy." He stopped pacing and looked directly at her. "And then you walked into my hotel room by mistake, and suddenly I can't remember why any of that seemed important." The office lights dimmed automatically as evening fell, casting long shadows across the room. Through the glass walls, they could see the last of the staff gathering their belongings, preparing to leave for the day. "We need to talk about this," Henry said, voice softer now. "Not here, not now, but soon." Lily nodded, relief and anxiety battling within her. "Soon," she agreed. 3 days later, Lily was finishing a report well after normal business hours. The office floor was empty, the cleaning crew having already moved to another level. A soft knock on her office door startled her. Henry stood in the doorway, tie loosened, jacket discarded. Without the armor of his full business attire, he looked more like the man from the beach, the one who had kissed her under the stars. He closed the door behind him with a quiet click. "We can't keep doing this," he said without preamble. "Pretending nothing's changed. Pretending we don't feel what we feel." Lily set down her pen. "It's complicated." "Of course it's complicated," Henry agreed, moving closer. "I'm your boss. There are power dynamics, professional considerations, potential conflicts of interest." He listed each point with precision, ever the businessman. "I've thought of every possible angle, every problem this could create." "And?" Lily asked, her heart beating faster. "And I don't care," he said simply. "Or rather, I care. We'll need to address each issue professionally, But none of them are reasons to walk away from this. He sat on the edge of her desk, closer now. Unless you want to walk away, if what happened at the resort was just a moment, something that belongs there and nowhere else, if that's the case, tell me now. The vulnerability in his expression took Lily's breath away. This was Henry Ford, CEO, the man whose frown could send executives scrambling, now looking at her with uncertainty in his eyes. It wasn't just a moment, Lily admitted. But I'm afraid of what happens when fantasy meets reality, when vacation romance hits corporate politics, when people find out, and they will find out. Henry reached for her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. You know what I'm afraid of? Regret. Walking away from something real because it's difficult. Is it real? Lily asked, giving voice to her deepest fear. Or is it just the result of an unusual situation, a bizarre set of circumstances that threw us together? Do you remember what you said to me on the beach? About how sometimes the wrong room turns out to be exactly the right place? His voice dropped lower. I've never believed in fate, or destiny, or any of that. But you walked into my room by mistake, and now I can't imagine my life if you hadn't. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss against her knuckles. I know the timing is terrible. I know the circumstances are complicated. I know there will be challenges. But I also know that what's happening between us is worth figuring out how to navigate all of that. The board won't like it, Lily said, practical even as her heart raced at his touch. Probably not, Henry agreed with a small smile. But I've made them a lot of money over the years. They'll adjust. He moved closer, one hand gently, tilting her chin up. I'm not going back, Lily. Not unless you tell me to. What happened between us wasn't just a vacation fantasy. It was real, and it's still real. And I think you feel it too. As Henry held her face gently and promised there was no going back for him, Lily realized she had a life-changing decision to make. The most life-altering decisions rarely announce themselves with fanfare. They arrive in quiet moments, disguised as simple choices. As Lily stood at the threshold between safety and possibility, watching Henry's vulnerable expression from across the room, she realized this was her cliff edge. Continue the careful path she'd carved through her career, or leap into the unknown with a man who'd begun as her boss, but had somehow become so much more. Lily paced her apartment, the weight of her decision pressing down on her shoulders. The corporate handbook might as well have been screaming from her bookshelf. Relationships between executives and their assistants were professionally radioactive. Everything she built, over years of meticulous work, could evaporate if things went wrong. And yet, the thought of returning to their strictly professional dynamic felt increasingly impossible. I can't just shut off what I'm feeling, Lily muttered to herself, clutching her coffee mug like an anchor. But I've worked too hard to throw it all away on, what? A connection that started with a drunken mistake? When her phone rang, Natalie's name flashing on the screen felt like divine intervention. If anyone could help her untangle this knot of emotions, it would be her oldest friend. I've made a complete mess of everything, Lily confessed, after explaining the situation. I can't stop thinking about him, but the professional risks are enormous. Let me get this straight, Natalie replied, her voice crackling slightly over the speaker. The man who supposedly has the emotional range of a calculator has admitted he has feelings for you, and you're sitting alone in your apartment, making pro-con lists. Lily glanced guiltily at the notebook beside her, where she'd indeed been listing all the potential professional consequences. It's not that simple, Nat. There's a power imbalance that can't just be ignored. And what happens if it doesn't work out? I'd have to find a new job, possibly a new career path, altogether. You know what's funny? Natalie asked. I've listened to you talk for 10 minutes about all the ways this could go wrong, but you haven't once mentioned what happens if it goes right. The question landed like a stone, in still water, rippling through Lily's thoughts. What if it works out? Research shows that people tend to overweigh potential negative outcomes when making emotional decisions, Natalie continued, slipping into the academic tone she used when making important points. You're so busy preparing for failure that you haven't even considered success. Lily stared out her window, suddenly seeing her situation from a new angle. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Not just of losing my job, but of this being real. It's easier to think of all the risks than to acknowledge how much I actually care. The question isn't whether there are risks, Natalie said gently. There absolutely are. The question is whether what you could gain is worth what you might lose. After hanging up, Lily made an impulsive decision. She needed to see Henry, not in his office, not in a conference room filled with colleagues, but somewhere neutral, somewhere she could think clearly. She texted him, "Can we talk?" The bar downstairs from the office, 8 p.m. His response was immediate. "I'll be there." The next few hours passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Lily changed outfits 3 times, finally settling on a simple blue dress that made her feel like herself. Not Henry's assistant, not a potential girlfriend, just Lily. When she arrived at the bar, her steps faltered at the entrance. Through the ambient lighting and casual chatter of after-work drinks, she spotted him immediately. Henry sat alone at a corner table, nursing what looked like scotch. His usual commanding presence somehow softened in this setting. He wasn't checking his phone or reviewing documents as he normally would. He was simply waiting, patient and still. The sight triggered an unexpected realization. He was just as vulnerable in this moment as she was. The powerful CEO was sitting alone in a bar, waiting for an answer that could change everything. As if sensing her presence, Henry looked up. Their eyes met across the room, and something inside Lily shifted. The fear didn't disappear, but it receded, making space for something stronger. With each step toward his table, she felt her resolve solidify. By the time she reached him, her decision was made. "Hi," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Hi," he replied, his usual confidence tempered with uncertainty. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't either," Lily admitted. "This isn't exactly following the corporate handbook." A small smile touched the corner of his mouth. "I think we left the handbook behind somewhere between you stumbling into my room and me learning about your niece's theories on dinosaur etiquette." The tension broke momentarily as they both laughed, remembering how that particular detail had slipped out during one of their performances for the investors. "Henry," Lily began, gathering her courage, "I've been thinking about everything. About us. About work. About what happens next." He nodded, his expression carefully neutral, though his knuckles whitened slightly around his glass. "And what conclusion did you reach?" "That I'm terrified," she admitted. "But not because I don't know what I want. I'm scared because I do know, and it complicates everything." "What do you want, Lily?" His voice was low, the question hanging between them. Lily took a deep breath. "I don't want this to end. Whatever this is between us, I want to see where it goes. The professional risks are real, but pretending these feelings don't exist isn't going to make them disappear." The vulnerability in Henry's expression was unlike anything she'd seen before, even during their most intimate moments at the resort. This wasn't the calculated businessman, or even the man who'd learned to navigate emotional intimacy for the sake of a business deal. This was simply Henry, stripped of titles and power dynamics. "This was never a game for me," he confessed, his voice uncharacteristically raw. "Not really. Somewhere between that first morning and now, everything changed. I've been waiting for you to see it too." "I see it," Lily whispered, reaching across the table to place her hand over his. "I've been fighting it because of what it might cost, but I see it clearly now." "We can figure out the professional complications," Henry said, turning his hand to intertwine their fingers. "There are solutions. Restructuring, reporting changes, transparency with HR. But what I can't figure out is how to go back to just being your boss when I know what it feels like to be something more." The honesty of his words wrapped around Lily's heart. This wasn't just about attraction or the thrill of forbidden connection. This was about two people who'd discovered something authentic in the most unexpected circumstance. "So we take the risk," Lily said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Together, he agreed, the relief in his eyes mirroring her own. In that moment, something shifted between them. The pretense was gone. There was no audience to convince, no investors to impress, just the truth of what they'd found in each other. Henry stood, moving around the table to her side. As he leaned down, Lily rose to meet him. Their kiss was different from the ones they'd shared before. Not a performance, not rushed or hidden, but an honest declaration. In the middle of a bar, where anyone from their office might see, they chose each other. When they finally pulled apart, Henry's expression held a lightness she'd never seen before. "You know this is going to cause quite the stir at the office tomorrow. I think I'm finally ready for a little chaos," Lily replied, with a smile, surprising herself with how much she meant it. As they left the bar together, Henry's hand found hers naturally, their fingers interlacing as if they'd been doing this for years rather than minutes. The fears and risks hadn't disappeared, but they'd been put into proper perspective against the possibility of what they could build together. Their interlacing fingers that night had been just the beginning of a story neither could have predicted. The simple act of holding hands as they walked out of that bar marked the first step toward a future that would defy every expectation both had for themselves. What began as a charade for business purposes had blossomed into something neither Henry nor Lily could have anticipated, something that would ultimately transform the calculating CEO into a man willing to create something beautiful with his own hands, no matter how imperfect. 6 months into their relationship, the rhythm they'd established surprised even them. At work, they maintained a careful professional distance that occasionally slipped when their eyes would meet across conference rooms. Henry would clear his throat and refocus on budget projections, while Lily hid her smile behind meeting notes. The assistants in the office whispered about how the CEO still called Ms. Parker into his office for meetings that lasted precisely 30 minutes. But they never noticed how Henry's hand would briefly touch the small of her back as she entered, or how her fingertips would brush his when passing documents. "We need to maintain professionalism," Henry had insisted during the early days of their relationship. "The board is watching us closely." "So no making out in the supply closet?" Lily had teased, enjoying the flash of pink that colored his ears. "At least not during regular business hours," he'd countered, revealing the dry humor that still surprised her. Evenings and weekends told a different story entirely. Henry, who once scheduled his day in 15-minute increments, now spent entire Sundays lounging on Lily's worn sofa, reading financial journals, while she graded her niece's pretend homework assignments. The transition hadn't been seamless. Henry's first attempt at making her breakfast had set off her smoke alarm and resulted in what could only be described as carbon pancakes. He'd stood in her kitchen, spatula in hand, looking utterly bewildered by his failure. "I run a multinational corporation," he'd said, staring at the smoking pan. "I should be able to make pancakes." Lily had laughed until tears streamed down her face. "Some things can't be mastered through sheer force of will, Mr. Ford." Those domestic moments revealed sides of Henry that his employees would have paid to witness. The man who demanded excellence in every business dealing spent 30 minutes creating elaborate pillow forts with Lily's niece during visits. The executive known for his cutting criticism of underprepared presentations became utterly tongue-tied, trying to tell Lily how beautiful she looked in morning light. The CEO, who never showed vulnerability, allowed Lily to see him asleep, defenseless and soft, in ways the business world never imagined possible. 3 weeks before their 1-year anniversary, Henry began acting strangely. Lily noticed him disappearing for lunch meetings that didn't appear on his calendar. Twice she caught him closing browser windows when she entered his apartment. His hands, always immaculate, suddenly sported small cuts and what looked suspiciously like glue residue. "Is everything okay?" she finally asked one evening as they walked through the park near her apartment. "Everything's fine," he answered too quickly, his fingers twitching slightly in hers. "Just busy with the Singapore acquisition." Lily didn't press further, but worry nagged at her. Henry had never been secretive before. It was one of the foundations of their relationship, after beginning with so many pretenses. Was he having second thoughts? Preparing to end things? The old insecurities of power imbalance threatened to resurface, despite the genuine partnership they'd built. On a Friday evening, Henry invited her to his penthouse apartment for dinner. Usually meticulous in his planning, tonight he seemed distracted. He'd forgotten to chill the wine and burnt the edges of their steak. His nervousness was so unlike him that Lily felt her own anxiety building with each passing minute. "Henry, you're scaring me," she finally said, placing her fork down. "What's happening?" He took a deep breath, studying her face with unusual intensity. "I've been thinking about how we started, about that night at the resort, and everything that followed." Lily's heart pounded painfully. Was this the end? Had he decided their relationship was too complicated after all? "I never planned for any of this," he continued, gesturing between them. "You know how I feel about plans. I have 5-year projections for breakfast choices, for God's sake." Despite her anxiety, Lily couldn't help but smile. It was true. Henry's need for order and control had been legendary, though significantly loosened during their time together. "But then you stumbled into my bed, and every plan I'd ever made became irrelevant." He stood suddenly, moving around the table to where she sat. "I need to show you something." Taking her hand, he led her to his home office, a room she'd rarely entered. On his immaculate desk sat a small velvet box. But it wasn't the typical jewelry store cube she might have expected. This box was slightly lopsided, clearly handmade, with the velvet unevenly glued to the cardboard beneath. Before she could process what was happening, Henry Ford, the man Forbes had once called the Ice King of Silicon Valley, dropped to one knee beside her. His hands, she noticed, were trembling slightly as he reached for the box. "I wanted to buy you the perfect ring," he said, voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "But then I realized that nothing about us has ever been conventional or perfect. We started with a mistake that turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me." He opened the box to reveal a ring unlike any Lily had ever seen. It was clearly handmade, the band slightly uneven, the setting for the diamond visibly soldered by inexperienced hands. Yet somehow, in its imperfection, it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "I made it myself," Henry admitted, a vulnerability in his eyes she'd never witnessed before. "It took 16 attempts, 3 minor burns, and 1 significant cut that required stitches. My assistant thought I was having a nervous breakdown when I requested jewelry-making tools." Tears filled Lily's eyes as the significance of his gesture washed over her. The man who delegated even the simplest tasks had spent weeks creating something by hand for her. "You challenge me every day, Lily. You argue with my logic, laugh at my rigidity, and force me to see the world differently. You've seen me at my coldest and most controlling, yet somehow you find me worthy of your love. Will you marry me?" In that moment, the psychological weight of his proposal became clear. This wasn't just a man asking a woman to marry him. This was a declaration that their power imbalance had been completely transformed. The executive who once commanded her professional life was now on his knees, offering her a symbol of their equal partnership, vulnerably presenting the imperfect work of his own hands. "Yes," Lily whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I'll marry you." Henry's hand still trembled slightly as he slid the crooked ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the one measurement he'd gotten exactly right. "We can get a professionally made one tomorrow," he said, eyeing his creation critically. "This is hardly adequate quality for—" Lily silenced him with a kiss. "Don't you dare," she said against his lips. "This is the only ring I want. It's us, imperfect, unexpected, and completely wonderful." As Henry wrapped his arms around her, lifting her off her feet, in a most un-CEO-like display of emotion, Lily caught sight of her hand over his shoulder, the uneven ring catching the light. Their relationship had begun with a simple mistake and transformed into something neither could have designed or planned. The handmade ring symbolized everything they'd become together, unique, authentic, and built with care despite the challenges. That handmade ring would shine beneath another light 6 months later, catching the golden sunset as Lily and Henry stood facing each other in a vineyard surrounded by rows of grapevines. The winery's stone terrace overlooked rolling hills, painted in amber and gold by the setting sun, creating a backdrop that felt intimate despite its grandeur. Unlike the corporate galas they'd attended together, their wedding was small. Just 60 guests seated in white chairs, adorned with simple greenery and wildflowers. Lily had chosen a sleek ivory slip dress that caught the breeze as she walked toward Henry, who waited beneath an arch of intertwined branches and garden roses. The man who once intimidated an entire boardroom with a single raised eyebrow now stood with visible emotion, his usual composure slipping as she approached. This wasn't the controlled CEO who had built an empire. This was simply Henry, watching the woman he loved walk toward their future. "I thought I'd seen every side of you in that boardroom," Natalie whispered as she adjusted Lily's train. "But I've never seen you look this certain about anything." The ceremony began with a nod to their unusual beginning. The officiant, a college friend of Henry's, greeted the guests with a smile. We're gathered here today to celebrate two people whose love story began with what most would consider a catastrophe. I've been asked not to share the details. Laughter rippled through the guests. But I can tell you that sometimes the biggest mistakes lead to the most beautiful outcomes. When the time came for vows, Henry took both of Lily's hands in his. The corporate titan, who once reduced a venture capitalist to tears with a cutting remark, now struggled to keep his voice steady. Lily, before you stumbled into my life, quite literally, I thought I knew exactly who I was and what I wanted. I had charts and projections for everything. He paused as several of their colleagues chuckled knowingly. What I didn't have was someone who could see past the CEO to the person beneath. You challenged me, frustrated me, surprised me, and ultimately changed me. He squeezed her hands. I promise to keep breaking rules with you, the ones I set for myself and the ones others try to impose on us. I promise to value your honesty over my comfort. I promise to remember that not everything can be scheduled, projected, or controlled. His mouth quirked into a smile. And I solemnly swear never to attempt jewelry making again without professional supervision. As the guests laughed, Lily blinked back tears, her eyes never leaving Henry's face. When her turn came, she took a deep breath. Henry, when I first met you, I was terrified of disappointing you. Now, I'm only afraid of a life without you. She smiled. I promise to love you when you're the brilliant CEO and when you're the man who burns toast at 3 in the morning. I promise to remind you when you've forgotten to take the lid off your coffee before taking a sip. Several guests laughed, though they couldn't know this referenced the 3 times Henry had burned himself this way in one particularly stressful week. I promise to stand beside you, not behind you, and to be your partner in everything we face. I vow to tell you when you're being impossible, which will probably be often, more laughter, and to listen when you need me to. Most of all, I promise to keep challenging you to be more than the title on your office door, because the man I fell in love with is so much more than that. Their colleagues exchanged glances at these inside references, while those who knew them best, Natalie, Henry's brother Michael, smiled with understanding. These weren't just ceremonial words. They were promises anchored in the specific reality of who they were together. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Henry cradled Lily's face between his hands as if she were the most precious thing he'd ever held. Their kiss wasn't the polite peck expected at formal events, but something deeper, a promise, a celebration, a beginning. It carried the weight of their journey from that embarrassing morning to this sacred moment. As they turned to face their applauding guests, Henry leaned close to Lily's ear. "Best contract I've ever signed," he whispered. Lily's laugh echoed across the vineyard. "The only one without a termination clause," she whispered back. Their reception unfolded beneath market lights, strung between the vineyard's oak trees. During dinner, psychological researcher Dr. Elaine Morgan, a college friend of Lily's, offered a toast that captured what many had observed. As someone who studies human connections professionally, I can tell you that what we're witnessing today is remarkable. Lily and Henry have turned a power imbalance into true partnership, which research shows is one of the hardest transitions for couples to make. She raised her glass. My studies show that relationship milestones like this one actually strengthen emotional bonds by creating shared memories that reinforce commitment. So what we're witnessing isn't just a beautiful ceremony. It's literally the neurochemical cementing of 2 lives. Later, as the night deepened and the dancing slowed, Henry pulled Lily away from the festivities to a quiet corner of the terrace. The stone was still warm from the day's sun, and the distant laughter of their guests provided a perfect soundtrack. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. "You didn't try to make another ring, did you?" Lily teased. Henry's smile was soft in the twilight. "No, I learned my lesson, but I did have this made." Inside the box was a delicate gold bracelet with a tiny key charm. "It's to remind you that you unlocked something in me I didn't know was there." He fastened it around her wrist. "And here I thought you were going to say something cheesy, like you've given me the key to your heart," Lily said, but her eyes shone with emotion. "That too," Henry admitted, but mainly it's about how you opened a door I didn't even know existed. As they stood together, Lily realized how far they'd come from that mortifying morning when she woke up beside her boss. The corporate hierarchy that once defined them had transformed into something equal and authentic. What began as a professional relationship complicated by power and expectations had evolved into a partnership built on seeing each other clearly. During the father-daughter dance, Lily's father whispered, "You know, when you told me you were dating your boss, I nearly had a heart attack. But watching him look at you tonight, I've never seen someone so completely centered on another person." "He wasn't always like this," Lily said. "Or maybe he was, underneath it all, and just needed someone to notice." As the evening came to a close, their closest friends and family formed a circle around them for one final dance. Henry held Lily close, swaying gently to the music. The same hands that had signed billion-dollar contracts now traced patterns on her back, with a tenderness reserved only for her. "Do you remember telling me that power imbalances make real connections impossible?" Henry murmured against her hair. "I was wrong," she admitted, "but only because you were willing to step away from that power with me." They had chosen to include humor in their vows. Something guests later commented made the ceremony feel uniquely theirs. This element of playfulness had been absent from Henry's public persona before Lily, but now it felt as natural as his confidence in the boardroom. Their wedding wasn't just a ceremony, but a declaration of the people they'd become together, more authentic, more vulnerable, and ultimately stronger. What began with a stumbling, wine-induced accident transformed into one of the most unexpected love stories in corporate America. Lily and Henry's journey reminds us that sometimes life's greatest gifts come wrapped in embarrassment and wrapped in chaos. Their relationship stands as living proof that even the most carefully constructed professional barriers can crumble when authentic connection takes root. Research shows that approximately 30% of workplace relationships actually lead to marriage, defying the conventional wisdom that office romances are doomed to fail. Lily and Henry's story isn't just an exception, it's part of a statistical reality that meaningful, lasting connections often form where we spend most of our waking hours. As they embark on their married life together, their story offers a powerful reminder to all of us. Sometimes, the wrong turn leads exactly where we're meant to be. The most rigid hearts can warm when the right person accidentally stumbles into them. And occasionally, finding yourself in the wrong room turns out to be the most right decision you'll ever make.